So I guess the topic that we're talking about is stream of consciousness writing. What I think we were starting to argue about in our favorite WhatsApp group, Async Book Club, is the pros and cons of stream of thought. And you were saying you're anti-stream of thought, and I was saying I was pro stream of thought. So why are you anti-stream of thought?
So are you familiar with Mark Rothko, the artist?
Yeah, I know Rothko for sure.
All right. Have you seen those color blocks?
It's his stupid squares. Yes.
Exactly. All right. So you know what I'm talking about. So here's the thing. I hate Rothko. I hate modern art. Like as a
well, let's not go that far. There is modern art that clearly required a lot of skill, effort, and style.
I agree, and I think
throw the baby out with the bathwater.
For sure. So what I mean to say is I don't mean modern art as an art happening contemporaneously with our lifetime. I don't mean all contemporary art. I mean, like, there are people like Mondrian and like these fucking people, or like Kandinsky, right? Cool shapes, really, really creative guy, lots of scribbles.
Kandinsky and Mondrian have some cool pieces overall.
I agree, sure, but they look good. Like, to me, and again,
I'm not really hard. It's actually a lot harder to do what they do than it looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to draw yellow and red and green rectangles consistently.
It's in a certain composition.
I mean, look,
it's much harder. Okay, it's much harder than a square, just a square.
Although they've done that too. See, this is what I mean. I don't think art is being made when a person just does shit. Like, I don't know how. For me, stream of consciousness or any craft like writing, art, it requires a person to apply a skill to transmute the raw material into a finished product. And that's the skill of an artist. Like,
you're assuming what you're reading is the first draft. That's my biggest argument, I think, for you. Sure. Is you're assuming when you're reading stream of consciousness that it's their legit first draft and they're just like diarrheaing on the page. It could be.
What it reads like to me. I mean,
it reads it like to you, but doesn't mean it is that. Let's say you knew it was like the 100th draft. It's been edited like a motherfucker. Does that change your thoughts about it?
I mean, it just makes me feel like they're bad. But also, like, there's stream of consciousness and stream of consciousness. So I hate with a capital H. I despise Henry Miller. I think that Tropic of Capricorn
was just ugh.
Like, but also I
it was nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah, it was. But like, I pushed myself through that, and then I was very young. I read it too young, but I did when I was reading it. I got it from a library because like this is when I went to the library to get it. I got it because in my mind it was Henry Miller is what smart people read. I want to be well read and smart. I'm going to read it, and I got to tell you, I was so disappointed, and I pushed myself through it despite it was horrible. Like, I despised it. I don't remember anything of it. And it's a stream of consciousness. So what I get from that is I don't care whether Henry Miller edited that book 1,000 times and that is what he produced. I am a simple reader. I do not make pretense. I don't want to dabble in high literature. I don't want labels. I hated his writing. And the reason I hated it was because it felt like listening to a person who is very intoxicated, but not anything good. Like, he's not writing poetry. He's not bringing my soul up to the heavens. He's talking about a person shitting in the bidet. What value is that for the? And like but that's sort of like the topic, right? But you can imagine that he could talk around it and make it like relevant. He could have polished that with like make it poetic or something. Instead, he was like, "Oh God," it was like
it's nonsense.
A mess. It's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. It's an unadulterated word diarrhea, puke. And quite frankly, I can do the same. And so can anybody else. And I don't understand why Henry Miller is respected and like the guy that like pisses himself in the gutter is not, because they're the same man.
My next book is Fight Club. It's very much diarrhea of the mouth in many parts, but in a good way, because it has a theme of being against the system, anarchy, against consumerism. It has like at least some kind of theme, and it also has a clear plot to follow. It has characters that are pretty easy to understand. The last book I have is Eyes Open, which we have an interview with the writer.
I've never read it. Is it on Async?
It's on Async.
Oh, nice.
The moral of the story for me is just because it is stream of thought, stream of consciousness, colloquial, does not mean it's good or bad. It's a way of writing that is very orchestrated chaos because it's a little chaotic how it's written in the format. It's like there could be, I think there's also probably a good amount of run-on sentences to create that feeling, because like some of like what writing is the format of how it's written, like the rules that are being followed, because in school we're taught to follow rules with writing, but then you read books that are like breaking the rules, yet they're still succeeding, and you're like, what? So I think what the texture of a book is a combination of like maybe the rules that are being followed versus the rules that are not being followed, and the more rules that are not being followed, the more dirty it is and the more stream of thought it is, right? Maybe
conventions are meant to be broken. I feel like that's the most banal. Like I'm not saying that I'm not arguing. I think that you have a very good point. I just think that a lot
you're
of
saying
times,
it's a basic point.
No.
Basic thought.
I'm not saying that.
Infantile.
Jesus.
You're calling me childish.
I am not. I am simply saying that in order to be able to break rules effectively and to be innovative, you need to learn the rules and follow them. It's like Picasso. He was a great portrait painter, and he was an actual painter before he started messing with cubes and being innovative before he went nuts. And I think that
he was a cubist, but doesn't mean he was messing with cubes.
Exactly. Like he became exactly. Yes. And I feel like a lot of times people they're like with poetry, this is very evident. They can't write good rhyme. They can't do good rhythm. They can't do cadence. So what they'll do is they'll write like blank verse, and it sounds really cool if you read your own, if you're really high on your own stuff, like if you're really getting high on your own supply, so to say, like you write something and you just like so into your own thoughts that you write this blank verse like a haiku, and you think it's the bee's knees, but it's not. It's usually not. And I feel like a lot of stream of consciousness writing is, unfortunately, like, write a book first. Like, get the basic plot down, my man. Like, write a basic book, and then you can innovate. Instead of just being like your whole shtick being word diarrhea, and then you say, "Oh, well, it's stream of consciousness. Like, look at all my thoughts in there. They're in there somewhere. You go find them." As you know, Michelangelo, the guy that carved David, he didn't present a slab of rock and say, "I am an artist. Here's a slab of rock that I have perfectly, carved. You have to see the David. That's the block." No, that's the work of an artist, right? So he's supposed to, or she's supposed to, take the marble away, cut out everything that is extra for the message to be communicated, right? And if you're doing stream of consciousness, unless you're doing it but I would almost argue, to your earlier point, if you're editing a stream of consciousness, that's bastardizing the method because you're no longer streaming your consciousness. And it's
but you're assuming that, again, the first draft is what you're reading.
You have to be, because otherwise it's not even a stream of consciousness any longer. So you've taken the method and you've now diluted it. So now it's just bad writing.
Well, I don't agree, because out of these books that I read, that I just said, I would say none of them are bad writing.
I would say that there is a threshold, right? Like Henry Miller's book, if we were to take it as an example, or actually a better one. I think everybody, did you guys read Faulkner in high school?
No.
So the book, I hated it. I hate Faulkner. I can't stand him. Like
Faulkner.
Fuck him is what I have to say.
Fucking Faulkner.
I think that people who, again, I am not educated. I don't consider myself educated. I don't consider myself well read. I have given up on these pretenses because they're too cumbersome.
I agree.
I mean, thank you for validating that. So I think that people who like Faulkner are lying. Like, they lie. They don't like it. I want to be like, I want them to educate me. I will shut up and listen to them for 2 hours and more. Talk to me about how they enjoyed that book. And that book is a perfect example. Like, there's one section, because it's 4 vignettes, and his publisher told him that he was failing because he was doing stream of consciousness. So by the fourth vignette, it's a normal book. By the way, Henry Miller, I think, also got the Nobel Prize, which makes me think, like, there are trends in literature. It's like fashion, like anything else. And I do think that some things are just simply hype. Chuck Palahniuk, again, I think that, like, I read most things by him except for, like, his latest shit because of the stylistic failures that I think a lot of his later books had. It was just porn, like in the old definition.
Yeah.
But it was still engaging because it was like, I remember reading it in high school and being like, holy crap, like I'm going to tell my bros about this thing. There's a difference between, I think, first person narrator, which I think that Fight, I agree with you that Fight Club is an example of stream of consciousness, but it's much more mediated and stylized. Like, I believe he edited the shit out of the book. I don't believe that Henry Miller did a single second of editing. He smoked and drank and, I don't know, shut up and then just wrote.
Imagine he edited it like crazy.
Henry Miller or Chuck Palahniuk?
Yeah. Henry Miller.
No, he didn't. It was actually, so what you're saying is it was actually even worse. It was just dots. He was just like turd in bidet. ...
No. It might have started as less ridiculous. I'd be willing to bet a nut that was not his first draft.
I am not willing to bet any of my testicles on or any other body part.
Well, you don't need to.
I don't understand why Henry Miller sat down to write that book. Like, maybe it was a cry for help, and then it got found, and they were like, "This is brilliant." Because here's the thing. I mean, this kind of goes back to the whole thing of, like, why do people write? I read a long time ago that writers become writers when they literally cannot not write. Like, people don't wake up one day and say, you know what? I have a great career as, like, a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm an accountant. I'm happy with where I am. I'm doing productive things. I'm going to write a book. I don't think people do that. You know, I think it comes from some sort of dissatisfaction. There has to be, like, a rub. You need to be somehow motivated to, but also simultaneously be egotistical enough to be like, yeah, my thoughts, my drivel is worth putting down and publishing it in, like, a book and forcing other people to read it. You have to have a strong ego and a strong presence.
You can say that about anything. That's, you know, they say that's about politicians. What you just said reminds me of a lot of what people say about politicians. They're all egotistical. I mean, what about to become a doctor, to become a judge, to become like the lawyer that defended O.J. Simpson? You know, in order to do anything, you could say you have to have some ego, but I don't think that's the case. I think I wouldn't say overall to write means you have to have some kind of ego. I think it's a way of expressing yourself. Having written a book, it's a way of expressing yourself. It's also a way, it's very therapeutic, the process of writing a book. Well, it could also be very stressful, but it's also very therapeutic. There's a research element. You know, I was motivated by Jules Verne, who did a lot of research for all of his books. I did a lot of research for the book that I wrote. So I don't know, maybe I see it from a different perspective. Like when you say it's terrible because it looks like stream of thought, again, I could see that. I could see how it was not a first draft. Like having read Henry Miller, Tropical Cancer, I can see how it was not a first draft. I can see how he tried very hard to do what he did, because it's not actually that easy to do that. It's not that easy to make everything that you write extremely disgusting, because your imagination is not as good as you think, I think.
Well, mine certainly not, but his clearly is.
Well, not really, because his first draft could have been a lot less obscene.
I mean, I guess I think stylistically, it's not my cup of tea. I guess that's.
Oh yeah, I agree. But again, in general, about stream of thought, I think it's just it depends on the writing.
Here's an example, though. If you took Desiderius Erasmus, and I think I brought that up of why I stopped reading it. If you brought Desiderius Erasmus into our world today, and you, without any context, flipped on the Kardashians and let him watch it, he would be as puzzled as I was reading that fucking book. And I gotta tell you, if you watch an episode of the Kardashians and really dig into it, like if you analyze and you really kind of go after every single action, you seek to interpret it, you apply your brain to it, you will come out with very deep takeaways and insights based on that one show about our society and culture. So who is to say, you watch a season of Jersey Shore, and it's an empty, vacuous show about trash people who do nothing. But if you write, like, you could write a book about like the underpinnings of, and like what pathos it exposes, and with that gaze, you could make the show more valuable. So this whole thing about high literature, I sort of despise it. I don't think anybody reads these books for real. I think people say that they've read it to sound smart.
I think some people read it for real, and I think like Crime and Punishment, for instance, perfect example of high literature that's well respected. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and nothing having to do with its being super popular and high literature. So I wouldn't say nobody reads it, or nobody reads it with genuine reason / likes it.
My question is always like, why? Why Dostoevsky? Specifically with Dostoevsky, we can't know what we don't know. So my question is always like, why am I picking up this book? Like, why Dostoevsky? I mean, sure, it's, you could say that Pythagorean theorem is useful because it teaches us this fundamental thing about like the world. Dostoevsky's book is his opinion on a situation that he made up. Like, why do we need to read his ravings? Like, I'm sure there are 10 Dostoevskys around Dostoevsky. He probably wasn't like.
There might have been a bunch of there. I'm sure there was good quality writers, and that's what they say is actually that's not what they say. It's the theme time and time again. Every really good writer had like a posse, and every good artist had a posse of like good artists around them, and all their friends were good artists, and they just like riffed off of each other. They all had that, but maybe he was that good because of the people around him. I don't know if you've noticed in like sports, for instance.
Yeah.
When you play with someone better than you, you generally play better than if you play with someone worse than you. So you can make the argument, oh yeah, why aren't we reading his friends' books or his contemporaries' books? Well, maybe his contemporaries made him as good as he was. I wouldn't shit on books just because they're popular. You're like punching up. So it's like kind of like, popular books. Oh.
I actually read a few books. My girlfriend gave me 2 books in a 3-book series. I forget what the artist is, who the writer is, but she's very popular. Oh my God. It's like one of the books. It's about like, she's an Irish writer, and the books are tiny, and it's very popular, and it's just vacuous. It's vacuous. Like, it's cool to read. It's about like women in Ireland, and girls in Ireland. TLDR, it's shit. They did not have a good time in Ireland, women. Still don't, apparently.
I'm sharing a lot of dirty feet.
I mean, there is just, it talks about the 80s, and I was reading this book, and I had to constantly remind myself that it's about the 80s. But it said on the cover.
Oh, yeah, that's the time of the IRA,
Yeah, but it was like, you read it, and economically, it
Irish
looks like Russia. It looks like Russia in the 1800s. This does not look like Western Europe. But besides the fact that it's like, holy crap, like it's like half a story. She wrote like half a story. So it's a popular book. It has rave reviews. It's on the cover. It says as good as Chekhov, and I don't think it is. I think it's actually shit. Whereas Chekhov is not. I'm just always wondering, like, would the world be so into Dostoevsky if, like, he was just another Russian writer? Like, why? Well, there are tons of Russian writers, there are tons of French writers, German, whatever, and we're not obsessed with them. Yet we're obsessed with this pedophile.
I absolutely hate War and Peace, the book. I tried reading it in Russian. I tried reading it in English, and it was just absolutely terrible. And then Crime and Punishment was complete opposite. I've read a bunch of other stuff with Russian writers and Russian stuff, and it was okay. But Crime and Punishment is truly special. It's truly special of like what goes on in someone's brain when they have mental health issues.
It's going in Dostoevsky's brain. That all of this is what drives me crazy. This reminds me of that one time I was in a slightly altered state of consciousness. We will not mention why or how, but I was in an altered state of consciousness, and I was talking to my brother about why I think fiction is like the whole totality of fiction is just, I called it the shit froth. And again, this is a hot take from a time when I was very high.
Yeah.
But here's like my question. Anytime you pick up a book and read fiction, you're not reading reality, right? And I don't mean real things that happen. You are reading the interpretation of other people's mental states through another person's mental states.
You could say that in nonfiction, it's that as well. It's an interpretation.
It is for sure.
Even like the most nonfiction of things, a history book is interpretation.
But this goes beyond interpretation. I think a historian, for sure, a historian can be like, oh, they did this for this reason. Unless they're just like saying this battle, then this, and then they're just chronologically.
But even then, like what happened in a battle depends on who you ask.
Exactly. But here we don't even have like Raskolnikov.
Yeah,
didn't exist.
So what?
He paused. But what I'm saying is these.
But he may not have existed. But when I read that book, I had a friend that was suffering with literally the same problem.
He thought he could kill somebody, and he thought he was justified in doing it, and he was testing himself whether he could.
Not exactly the same problem, but similar problem.
What kind of? Okay, now I'm curious. What problem was your friend dealing with? What was that?
Very bad depression, anxiety, social anxiety, paranoia to the max.
This guy was a murderer.
Okay, before he was a murderer, he was extremely depressed and basically a hermit. It's like he is the one with the mental issues. Like, why am I reading a book by a person who is sick? Like, this is my question about Henry Miller too. Like, because, and this goes back to my earlier point about, I think that being a writer almost requires a level of pathology. And I could be wrong, because I have only thought about writing, and I dabble in poetry, but I've never written a book, and I am frankly daunted by the research, and you know, I don't feel myself. I don't feel that I have anything to say that could fit in a book, frankly. But I think that someone like Dostoevsky, to claim to be able to engineer human souls, that's a level of like self-indulgence that I can't even fathom. Like I don't. Character building is very difficult. So like, not only character building, but like the dynamic between characters. Like I said, with my book that I wrote, it was a lot of research, but a lot of research into like character building and the relationships that the characters have, creating like love triangles. I wouldn't call it indulgence. Again, it's creative outlet.
Sure. I mean, I guess. Look, my
some
view.
Some of these people are quite full of themselves, just like some doctors are full of themselves. But then some doctors are just really care about their patients and are trying to do the best for they can. And some writers are trying to really do the best they can and really love what they do.
But I guess there's no way to there's no way to test whether a Raskolnikov in that situation would actually act like we're just dealing with Dostoevsky, imagining himself as Raskolnikov. Like he thought of this person inside of his head.
Necessarily, you don't know if he was influenced by other people. I don't know.
Let's assume that he was, but I'm just saying we're still like. At the end of the day, and this is true with everything is interphased through our brain. But this is like we are reading reality not as it is, and we're not even perceiving it through our own filter. It's like a filter after a filter. It's like dating a girl off of Tinder who's taken her picture through five filters. You're not getting the girl. She's not there.
I think sometimes those filters can make things almost. Like, for instance, Amazing Adventures, which we're going to be reading. We're going to be doing a video about that. I have so many notes in that book, like Stranger Than Fiction, Stranger Than Fiction, Stranger Than Fiction. I wrote that so many times. And the reason why is because there's so many moments that are just like, no way, no, come on.
But it is fiction.
Way. It is. But it's just written so freaking well that it's like Stranger Than Fiction. It's like creatively done coincidence that's stranger than fiction.
As someone who doesn't consider himself to be like the picture perfect of mental health, I don't want to read the ravings of a lunatic. And I feel like I'm made ill by it. You know what I mean? Like reading Dostoevsky, I'm like, why are we thinking about this? What kind of person wakes up in the morning and has the thought pattern of Napoleon is justified in conquering like half the world and killing millions? Certainly I could kill just one lowly old lady. Who the fuck has that thought? Like, and
Well,
if you do, not you, but if you do, then I don't want to hear about it because it's nuts.
Well, that's what I mean. That helps you understand why someone would try to assassinate the president twice.
But
That would help you understand why someone does like
how?
mass shootings.
How would it? How would it? He didn't have a grievance. His grievance was with himself. He was.
What?
Raskolnikov wanted to test himself, dude. Right?
He didn't have a grievance.
What grievance did he have against this lady? The fact that she took his money? Well,
the money.
I mean, that's not the central question. Essentially, he doesn't kill her because I mean, certainly he's driven crazy by poverty and like the indignity of it all. But poor people don't all have the thought process of like the Napoleon. It's just it's wacko. Like it's wacko. And my question is, why am I reading something by a wacko?
You don't know if it's written by someone that's a wacko or it's written by someone who is doing the best they can to illustrate a wacko.
My question is, for what purpose?
Well, for me, it had a lot of purpose. Again, it helped me understand my friend.
I mean, look, I guess
it helped me. It helped me create. It helped me create empathy. I mean, look at the original stories. They're all like myths and allegories to help you learn stuff and to understand right from wrong, good versus evil, what to do in certain situations, how to empathize.
Like, but we don't know, I guess, whether that person is like all we see from any work is just a reflection of the author's psyche. And if that psyche is
of
diseased,
the author's psyche,
yes. If
no,
it's
not necessarily.
You don't
so
think, okay.
What you're reading is not necessarily okay. An actor.
Mm-hmm.
If an actor acts like a crazy person, are they a crazy person?
They are certainly not a crazy person, but they didn't invent this character.
Yes, they are. An actor is okay. Doesn't matter. You don't. Okay, what if an actor writer creates a monologue and he's perfectly sane and he writes a character that's absolutely insane and then acts it out? Just because a writer wrote a character that's insane or whatever doesn't mean they're that.
Yeah, I would argue that character that person doesn't know how to be insane. So we are reading a representation of what that person believes to be insane. But we have no test.
They may not know, but they may have had friends with that, family with that. You know, they might have done a lot of research with that, talked to doctors about it, talked to psychiatrists. Like Tropic of Cancer. I mean, for all we know, if you met Henry Miller, he'd be just like a regular fucking dude.
With deep, I look, maybe, but I watched, as an example, I've watched a bunch of like interviews of schizophrenics, like medical movies. They're fascinating. I've watched them in Russian. It's like Medfilm. If you ever, they're all over YouTube, man. Like they go through different schizophrenias and they talk and they have different disorders. And it's like an interview, like a medical. They point out like the speech patterns. And I got to tell you, some of these people, you like they sound like these writers, but the problem is that when you talk to them, you very quickly begin to establish that they
don't sound like the writers. They sound like what the writers are writing.
But they have no. What I'm saying is that person could write a book, but that person's like the software that's happening. It's producing things like the output that it produces. It's not necessarily valuable as a representation of anything else except for the confusion in their head. So you don't have, essentially, you kind of never know. You never know anything except for that. I mean, it's hard for me to explain this, I guess, but like I will stand on this point. Like when we read Dostoevsky, we're only looking at Dostoevsky. We're not looking at anything beyond him. Like it's him. He is all those people. They're only the genesis is in his brain. All the developments are only in his brain. Sure, he's influenced by reality, but all that is filtered through his brain. And if that brain is quote unquote ill, if it's diagnostically ill, depressed, or whatever, it's going to result in an output that isn't going to be. It's going to be an insight into his psychosis and nothing else. Like you're not going to learn what it's like to be that person. You can empathize, all that stuff. I'm not invalidating that. I'm just saying that if I were to read Crime and Punishment and say, okay, a person in this situation acts this way, I mean, Dostoevsky in this situation thinks that this person would act this way. He's giving us one tiny. So I'm just saying that the insights are not necessarily the authors. They're sort of like read into the text by the reader. Like you're making the insights based on his drivel. It's not a teaching book. He's not teaching you how to be empathetic.
I wouldn't call it drivel.
I would. And the insight you would glean is only based on what I'm going to be giving. I'm going to be controlling the projector. I'm going to be fully in charge of where I'm pointing your consciousness, where I'm guiding your consciousness, how I'm phrasing things. I mean, there's almost like there's this whole thing about the death of the writer versus, the reader kind of creates his own meaning by reading the book. The writer is just putting words on the page. I would say that, I don't think the writer is dead. It's just like it's the imagination of that person. You're getting a good view of what that person thinks about some things. Nothing else.
Sometimes it's okay just to read a good story and to just enjoy the experience and to keep someone captivated in a story and get them on board and forgetting that they're reading and wanting to get back into that story is very good skill. It's very hard to do that well. And then that's like the experiential part. And then the insights that you get from reading it, I mean, that's a next level, meta thing. You can enjoy Netflix and chill and binge watching YouTube from all day to night. So that's the experience of liking the experience. But then the part of getting meaning from it, that's another level. And it is kind of funny if you think about it, because you can get meaning from the book that the author didn't even intend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. You're making it. You're making the meaning, but you're making it out of his shit.
You are, but doesn't mean the author didn't intend that meaning.
But you're building what I agree.
For instance,
you're building out of his bricks.
This is Bob's book.
Yeah.
That he wrote, and I asked him about in the video. I asked him I found it very humorous and I really enjoyed it. Did you intend to have that humor? He said, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I also asked him it seems like there's a lot of criticism of the American healthcare system and how it works, and especially in hospitals. Did you intend for that to be a theme? And he did. And there was a lot of insights for me in this book about the problems that people in healthcare face working in this healthcare system. And it's things that you can gain insights from that are much better than any textbook. Textbooks are good for learning anatomy, physiology, biology, all these basic level things. But then the human part of medicine or anything, the human part of accounting, if there isn't a human part of accounting, is hard.
Only the human cost. Yeah. The human cost of accounting.
Which is that a debit or a credit?
I mean, we're all human resources, so it's an asset. Most of us are an asset to some people.
Yeah. So it's very hard to learn certain things in nonfiction form, and to wrap this thing in a bow, the colloquial stream of thought, stream of consciousness type of writing sometimes is like the epitome of that fiction because it's so raw and so real that it feels like reality. Like it feels like someone is talking to you in the real world.
Yeah, but dude, our entire brain feels like reality, and it's not. It's a filter for reality.
It's a pretty good filter.
Is it?
I mean, it got us this far.
And this is
how many iterations of Homo sapiens it took to get to us two?
And unimpressive. Except I'm unimpressed. But you're yes. Look,
I'm impressed at both faces I see on my screen.
As am I. We are a pair of lovely Semitic gentlemen.
I mean, there's optical illusions.
Okay, you know the movie, the old Russian movie "Джентльмены удачи"?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Do you remember the part when he's like, "Ты туда не ходи, ты сюда ходи"?
No.
Like, don't go there, go here because they're shoveling the snow. Anyway, it's like an old reference. The point is, my question is, this is how I view literature. Don't make meaning out of this. Make meaning out of this. Right? We're always building, we're always looking for insights in the muck that they present us. Like within, and I guess it's just the nature of story, but the narrative, talked about the captivation. That's a key part of it. The point is to captivate your attention and to keep it locked in making meaning here in this book, not over there.
At least it's not doom scrolling. You know, you could do much worse things with your time, and at minimum, it helps me sleep.
I would just present it as like, is Dostoevsky doom scrolling? Just a higher, more bougie, more regarded way.
I wouldn't
don't think so?
the two at all because doom scrolling is controlled by an algorithm that's designed to make you buy more stuff.
As opposed to Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky is not trying to convince you to buy anything except for his story.
I think this was a very good impromptu taping.
Very nonsensical, very colloquial, very stream of thought,
very demure, very mindful.
Yes.
May our balls not hurt.
Listening to our Andropause
Hell yeah.
YouTube channel.